Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. I am Robert Kurtz, moderator for the program. This program is brought to you by PriorityOne Group, which is proud to celebrate its 20th anniversary this year. PriorityOne Group is a leading provider of integrated healthcare IT services to organizations including ambulatory surgery centers, medical practices, and hospitals. Our program will begin with a presentation. We'll have a question and answer session following completion of the presentation. You can submit any questions you have throughout the presentation by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. Our presenter will attempt to answer as many questions as he can during the time we have, and will follow up on questions he does not have the opportunity to address. You'll also receive an email within about a day that will include a copy of the presentation, instructions for how you can view a recording of the program, and a survey about the webinar. You could submit your feedback or any other additional questions at that time. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Michael DePalma is Channel Development Manager. One more time. Michael DePalma is Channel Development Manager for Datto. Datto protects essential business data for tens of thousands of companies, delivering access to data on-site, in transit, and in the cloud. After covering the California market as a channel sales executive for Datto, Michael joined the business development team in February 2016. As a channel sales executive, Michael worked with existing Datto partners on a broader scale through facilitating marketing plans and webinars, and on a client-specific scale through vetting individual opportunities to help ensure the proper business continuity solution was presented for each specific environment. In his role as Channel Development Manager, Michael represents Datto at numerous trade shows and technology conferences throughout North America, connecting with managed services providers and educating them on the value of a true business continuity solution. I would now like to turn the floor over to Michael for today's presentation. Michael?
All right, thank you very much, Robert. So just a quick introduction about Datto. We are a business continuity solution provider based out of Norwalk, Connecticut, so about 40 miles east of Manhattan. We have been partnered with PriorityOne since 2012, so it's been a very strong partnership. They're actually an enterprise level partner of ours. So we do a lot of these type of educational seminars, both in person and via webinar. So definitely look forward to more in the future. The idea today is to kind of rethink backup in general. For years and years, backup has kind of been thought of and bought and sold as an insurance policy, right? You kind of need a second copy of your data just in case your building burns down or there's a flood or a tornado or one of these type of natural disasters. We actually protect in our data centers about 300 petabytes of data. So if you're not familiar with how large a petabyte is, most folks know how large an MP3 file is. If you had 1 petabyte of MP3 files, you could actually play music continuously for 2,000 years. So that's a lot of data that we protect. And with that, we do a lot of internal studies to kind of find the cause of downtime, the cause of data loss. And we found that 93% of all data loss and downtime have nothing to do with these type of disasters, the natural disasters that we think we need a backup for just in case. We've actually found that over 60% of all data loss and downtime is due to one thing. And if we think about it, we could probably come to that answer, and that answer is user error, right? It's somebody in the office, not maliciously, but inadvertently clicking on the wrong attachment, going to the wrong website, not really hovering over those hyperlinks before we click on them, and infecting your network. So we've found that really it's people that are our greatest weakness. And that actually goes for us as well here at Datto. This is an older story, and then really wherever you get your news from, whether it's online or on TV or in your local paper, you'll be bombarded with cybersecurity attack stories, and it's kind of hard to sift through and figure out what applies to me. This is actually a couple years old. Alcoa is a manufacturing company based out of Pennsylvania, billion-dollar company, all kinds of security levels in place. An email went out to just 15 of their employees. They got one of the employees to click on that link, and it infected their entire network. And the reason why I keep it in this presentation is for this quote, which is hanging on our office here in Datto. At least one employee will click on anything, and that's what these criminals are really relying upon. The idea of the emails that come out from your long-lost uncle that say, "Hey, send me $5,000. I'm going to send you $1 million in a few weeks." Those days are kind of behind us because now, nobody's really falling for those. What we're seeing now, and it's at every level, and even the Pentagon has come out with some studies that they've seen, but the sophistication of these phishing attacks is really far beyond what we've seen in previous years. The idea here is to make these emails look and feel just like every other email in your inbox. You might it might be an email that looks like it comes from your boss or a coworker or somebody in the finance department at your office that says, "Hey, I need this wire transfer approved immediately." And it might look just like every other email in your inbox. We see emails coming in that look like they're from third-party vendors, Netflix, FedEx. Okay, click here to track the status of your package. You might be seeing emails that look like this all day long, and it looks like every other email in your inbox. But if you were to scroll over that hyperlink that says click here, you'll see that it's not sending you back to FedEx. It's sending you back to some nefarious website that's going to infect your network. That's what we're seeing. And really the evolution of these criminals and their style of attack has really led us to really what's become the biggest epidemic in the technology world for small to medium-sized businesses, and that's ransomware. Okay, it was estimated in 2015 that about $325 million was paid from small businesses to these criminals in just direct payments. That number skyrocketed to just about $1 billion last year. So why do I have the number $25 billion up on the screen? Well, that number actually accounts for the additional costs that small businesses incur for having this downtime, right? Because even if you're paying this ransom, you're not necessarily getting your data back right away. And for the folks that don't want to pay that ransom, there's a cost to that downtime and going to recover your data. And so when you start to look at that number of $25 billion as compared to the actual $1 billion that's paid from the criminals, that's the number that these criminals are relying upon, because they want you as a business owner to do that math in your head and say, hey, I could pay this $3,000 ransom now and fingers crossed, hopefully get my data back, or I could restore from a backup. Maybe I'm using tape backup or something a little more antiquated, and it might take me 3, 4, 5 days to get that data back. The cost of that downtime is going to be far more than the cost to pay the ransom, and that's why so many people are paying it. It really has become a true epidemic. So just to get into what ransomware is, because there are some misconceptions out there. So what exactly ransomware is? The data is not actually leaving your network. All they're doing is encrypting the data, and that's kind of the genius behind it, because it allowed them to cast a much larger net. For years, really the only people that were being infected were the businesses that had data that on its own held value, that could be bought and sold on the open market, financial records, personal information for identity theft, those type of things. And so with ransomware, the idea here is that they really don't care what your data is. They just know that you're relying upon it. You can't operate your business without it. And they know that you'll pay to get it back. They ask for it in Bitcoin because it's very hard to track. And depending on where you're located, it's not always easy to find a Bitcoin exchange and get that Bitcoin into a Bitcoin account and have that set up and then transfer it over to the criminal. So every minute that is lost really costs a lot of money. Now, Datto just completed back in Q4 of 2016 the largest ransomware specific survey of its kind. Okay, we had 1,100 Datto partners, so managed service providers around North America respond. And of those 1,100 respondents, 91% reported at least one ransomware attack to one of their clients. 43% experienced 6 or more attacks in the last year, and 31% reported multiple attacks in the same day. An interesting story, I was doing a seminar out in Chicago to a group of law firms, actually, and it was a ransomware specific survey. I did a show of hands, how many people here have been infected with ransomware. And a bunch of hands went up, and I went on to finish my presentation. And afterwards, I'm having lunch, and I'm sitting next to one of the gentlemen who raised their hand. And I said, hey, I saw you raise your hand. You guys have been hit with ransomware. He said, yeah, we've actually been hit 3 times in the last 6 months. I said, wow. I said, well, was it one of the examples I gave? Were you able to pinpoint who it was inside your company that was getting tricked and clicking on the wrong email? Was it the Netflix example, one of those? And the guy kind of shrunk his shoulders and he said, oh yeah, we found out who it was. It was actually me. I was the one that was getting duped. I got duped all 3 times. And I'm actually here at this seminar as a punishment to make sure I never do it again. So I don't know if I was supposed to take offense to the fact that it was punishment to come hear me talk, but I said, look, you must be one heck of a lawyer to still have a job and only have to, get a slap on the wrist to go to a ransomware seminar. But that just shows you there's an idea out there that, okay, maybe I'll just pay the ransom, I'll get my data back, and then I'm good to go. All that does is put a bigger target on your back, because now these criminals know, yeah, we can get money out of these guys, and we're going to keep attacking them until they finally stop paying us. And so that was what was happening out there. One of the reasons why it's hard to actually pinpoint the exact dollar amount that's being paid to these criminals is that less than 1 in 4 ransomware incidents are reported to authorities. That's why the FBI has a tough time really putting real numbers onto what the scope of these criminal enterprises are. One of the reasons for that is most of these folks are actually paying somewhere along the lines of $2,500, $3,000, and the FBI can't handle that kind of volume. And most of these companies know, what's the point of me submitting this to authorities and being down for a week? I just got to get my data back. And so it's really hard to pinpoint the scope of this. Of the respondents, 42% did pay the ransom. They did not have a real solution in place to get that data back otherwise, so they did pay the ransom. And 1 in 4 of those people never recovered their data. So think about that. 25% paid the ransom, thought they were going to get their data back, and instead, all they did was just waste money because they never got their data back. We also saw, incidents where, okay, thank you for your $2,500 down payment. Now the remaining balance to get your data back is $2,500 additional money. We've seen, thank you for your $2,500 payment. Now you could pay us $100 a month or so, and we'll never attack you again. There's actually a new strain of ransomware out there, popcorn ransomware. It's an interesting name, but what they're doing is they're saying, okay, you could pay me this $2,500 fee, and I'll give you your data back, or you can go out and infect 2 other people for me, do my job for me, and that's your options. And it must be working because we're seeing more and more of these cases out there. If it wasn't working, they would move on to something else. So you're now seeing companies put in a situation where they could say, all right, I'm either going to pay this ransom, I'm going to incur a bunch of downtime, or I can go out and infect 2 other people and get my data back right away. It really is just truly running rampant. And one of the reasons why I like doing these kind of educational style seminars is because within that survey, we did survey some end users, and we had some pretty interesting results. 88% of the managed service providers were highly concerned about the threat of ransomware, whereas only 34% of small business owners were. Because managed service providers live in this world of seeing these attacks on a daily basis and being on the IT blogs and all those things and seeing how rampant it's really running, whereas small business owners, until it happens to them or happens to somebody down the street or a family member, they might not really understand the true threat that ransomware is. So really what these type of educational events, and I'm very happy to be on this with PriorityOne, is to increase that knowledge base for the small business owners, really in all types of verticals, because it truly is running rampant. Now, some of the larger stories you will have seen in the paper are the large hospitals, universities. This hospital out in Hollywood, California was hit with ransomware. They were asked for a huge sum of money. And not only did they pay the $17,000 in Bitcoin to get their data back, in fact, they actually had 2 servers that were down for 2 weeks. So think about what the cost of the bottom line is for a large hospital to be away from some of their data for multiple weeks. And then think about what the cost of just the hit to their reputation would have been to be down a couple of weeks. And when the FBI actually did investigate this case, because it was one of the larger, more high-profile cases, they came to the conclusion that it was, as an example I gave, just a simple case of a member of their staff clicking on a malicious link or an attachment in an email. It came down to that. It was that simple. When we look at the type of occupations that are actually being hit the most, you see healthcare is ranked number 2. This is an industry that is highly being targeted by these criminals. And again, I mentioned it's a $1 billion enterprise. And so they're looking at really all walks of life. But when you look at who they're really targeting most, you see professional services coming at number 1, and healthcare is right there at number 2 in terms of professions that are being targeted. So it truly is an epidemic. And now, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has gotten involved. The FBI, as I mentioned, they've started to come out with some alerts. I actually sat on a panel with a gentleman from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security up in Rochester back in January. And this was, again, it covered ransomware, but it really encompassed all cybersecurity threats out there. And he basically said, you've got 2 options. One of which would be to pay the ransom, and fingers crossed you hope to get your data back, but the government's stance on it is obviously not to pay that ransom, A, because it emboldens these criminals, but B, because you're not guaranteed to get your data back, and that ransomware could be running in the background moving forward, and now they're just going to encrypt your data again. But they went through some of the variants that were out there, and if you're curious, there's about 4 million variants. So if you want to stick around for the next few days, Robert will go through all 4 million of those variants for you. But I do get the question all the time about why, what is the government doing to combat this? And really, what can they do? If they put a lot of resources into shutting down one of those variants, well, okay, that's great. Now you've got 3,999,000 to go, and there's probably new ones popping up every day. And so they did come up with some recommendations, and the recommendations, basically we're talking about a multi-layered approach to security. in general, but you would think on the surface that their number one recommendation would be on the preventative side. But in fact, their number one recommendation was to employ a data backup and recovery plan for all critical information. This was critical for them because, again, there's only two options. You're either going to pay that ransom or you're going to restore from a backup, and the type of backup you have is obviously very important. So, you know, we have these conversations about security. Most people, I'm sure listening, have some sort of backup. There's very few companies out there that don't have a backup solution. But I'm going to give you a real life example. Somebody that had a backup solution and still was vastly impacted by a ransomware attack. And you might have seen this story in the papers a few months back. Now, this happened on Black Friday of 2016. The San Francisco Metro Transit Authority was hit with ransomware. Now, you got to give it to these criminals. They're smart and they know when to attack. So they get it through on Black Friday. They're asked for $73,000. Now, by policy, the Metro Transit Authority is not going to pay this type of ransom. They came out and made a statement. They never even considered making that payment. But and in addition to that, they said, well, I have a backup solution. We pay a lot of money to back up all of our data. And so they talked to their IT team and said, okay, how long until we're back up and running? And essentially they said, okay, we're looking at things. I think we could be back up and running first thing Sunday morning. So that really left them with two options. And at the end of the day, really only one option. First option would be, okay, we could shut down service until we're back up and running. Now, shutting down service for the Metro Transit Authority, especially on Black Friday and the subsequent Saturday, really wasn't a true option. So their next option, and the one that they went with, was, okay, we're going to give away free rides. We have to keep up and running. We have no way to process this, though. So we're actually going to give away free rides for 2 days, Black Friday and the following day. So what I did is I went to their website. I got numbers from their actual website. Okay, now they say that they provide about 735,000 rides a day. That's on average. I'm going to be willing to say that number is probably higher when you're talking about Black Friday and the following Saturday, but we'll use their numbers. It's $1 to ride the bus, $2.25 per rider on the light rail. So they lost anywhere between $1.5 and $3.5 million just for being down for 2 days. That's where that number, if you remember a few slides ago, I talked about $1 billion in payments, but the actual cost to businesses being in the neighborhood of $25 billion, that's where this cost of downtime comes in. And that's the number that the criminals are relying upon. Now, San Francisco Metro Transit Authority didn't cave and pay the ransom, but so many people are. And when you think about $1 billion, now this is a large enterprise, 73,000, but on average, the average ransomware payment to these criminals is somewhere around $2,000. You start breaking down $1 billion in payments into small $2,000 increments. That shows you how large this net is that they cast and how many people are put in a situation where they have no other recourse but to pay that ransom. It's an astounding number when you think about the amount of people that are being attacked and then have to pay. It truly is, like I've mentioned, an epidemic. Now, we do presentations all over the world, really, my team, and really wherever we go, we get bombarded with these questions about what's going on. We opened an office in Singapore. The very first question was about ransomware because Southeast Asia is really seeing a lot of attacks. But it continues to be North America and the U.S. specifically being the place that gets attacked the most. All right, so the idea here and the idea, the educational piece of this is that you want to have a multi-layered approach. You want to create a culture of security within your company. Okay, so it starts with your antivirus and goes all the way through all of the steps that a company like PriorityOne can provide for you. But the last line of defense really is a business continuity solution. And I wanted to just take 1 minute to tell you how that kind of differs from a traditional backup. We saw what happened with Metro Transit Authority. They had a traditional backup. It took them 2 days to get back online. What business continuity does, and what we do at Datto, is we have an image-based backup, which means we're capturing everything on whatever server and critical workstation that we're backing up. And we're capturing everything, which includes the operating system, the applications, everything that lives on that on your server or workstation is going to live on that Datto device. It's automatically going to get replicated to our data center. So now we've got multiple copies of your data in different geographical locations. So if one of those disasters that I mentioned, the 7% disasters of the fires and floods or those type of things did occur, you'd be protected because we'd have multiple copies of your data. But what this does, it doesn't just give you the ability to say, okay, we've lost no data, we've lost no volumes. It gives you the ability to virtualize, and that's going to keep your business up and running. And how this works is, since everything that lives on that workstation, or if this represents your server, lives on that Datto device, if you are hit with CryptoLocker or any of the variants out there of ransomware, this Datto device is essentially going to operate as your server and keep you up and running. And PriorityOne can get you back up and running probably within an hour or less and get you back up and running and keep your business going, so that you're not just protecting yourself from data loss. You're protecting yourself from that downtime, which is where that real value is. And now we're in that virtualized state, we're actually taking active backups as well, so that when that server is replaced or wiped clean and ready to be restored, we can get all the data, not just the data that you had before the attack, but all the changes that were made in the 2 days or a week or 2 weeks that you're in that virtualized state back onto that new server. So you've lost no time because you were able to virtualize instantly, but you also have lost no data, even the future data that you were saving during that time. Now the benefits to it are pretty obvious, right? We're going to reduce the amount of downtime. It's that downtime that these criminals are relying upon. You doing that math in your head to say, should I pay this ransom or incur several days of downtime? It's going to help your RTO and RPO. Now, these are two acronyms that I think are pretty important. Everyone should be able to answer these questions. There's a million acronyms in technology, but these are very important. Your RTO is your recovery time objective. How much time can you absorb? And whatever solution you have in place, you should know, okay, if our servers were to just crash or whatever were to happen, how long would it take me to get back up and running? The trickier part is to really put a dollar value on that. San Francisco Metro Transit Authority, they answered their question with a real life example, okay? They were down for 2 days. That's what their solution can provide, and it cost them several $1 million. Everyone on this webinar is going to have a different RTO, but the idea is you could be able to walk back and talk to your technology team and say, okay, how long would it take us to get back up and running? And then again, have the finance team look at some things and say, okay, what would that cost us in real dollars? Your RPO is a little easier to answer. That's your recovery point objective. How much data would we lose? And that's really simpler because it's just basically saying, how often are we taking backups? Are we taking it daily? Well, then obviously you run the risk of losing a day's worth of data. If it's weekly, a week's worth of data, and so on. The only caveat to that is if you're not testing your backups, there's really no way to answer that RPO question, right? Because you could be taking daily backups and not know that those backups are failing. And now you're put in a position where you say, well, okay, we're only losing a day's worth of data. You go to restore and you find out, well, we haven't had a real backup in 3 months because nobody's been testing them. With Datto, we're able to test your backups automatically and not just test that the backup occurred, but actually spin up that virtual machine, that instant virtualization capabilities in the background, so that you know that not only do we have a clean backup, we have that ability to virtualize. And then the last thing there is that you're able to do that virtualization capability both locally from that device or from the cloud if that Datto device is compromised as well. So again, the idea here is to rethink backup. Think about things as business continuity. Backup is something I'm sure everyone has. The business continuity is really the best way to combat something like ransomware or really any of the cyber attacks we're seeing out there. And so before I turn it back to Robert and get into some Q&A, and I hope we got some great questions out there, I do want to just let you know about the Night at the Races, which is May 19th. At the Meadowlands. It's an event that we've taken part with PriorityOne in the past, and we're proud to be there again this year. If you're interested in RSVPing, go to events@p1cgroup.com and register. It's a great event, and I will probably be there along with a couple other folks from Datto, and I know the whole PriorityOne team. So if you are interested, this is definitely a great event to attend. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Robert. See if we have any questions coming in.
Thank you, Michael, for a very informative presentation. I appreciate your throwing my name out there earlier. I think I'll probably just focus on moderating the Q&A rather than talking through those millions of examples there.
4 million.
So we'll now begin the Q&A portion of the program. As a reminder for our attendees, you can submit any questions you have by typing them into the control panel in the space labeled "Enter a question for staff" and clicking send. Let's go. First question. Michael, what's the first thing my organization should do if we get ransomware?
Well, that's a great question. And I would say it actually starts before you get ransomware in general. You have to have an action plan in place. You have to know, everyone in your office needs to know exactly what you need to do if you are hit with ransomware, really anything. And that's really goes back to that educational piece of things. So you want to have that action plan in place. You want to isolate whatever machine is infected, because whatever server or that this machine has access to, that ransomware is going to find its way there and start encrypting as many things as possible. But then ultimately, the first call you want to make is to your IT support provider to exactly figure out, okay, what are our options here? How quickly can we restore? And that's where a company like PriorityOne would come in. But that would be my suggestion. If you do see that scary red screen of, hey, you've been infected with ransomware, here's the click here to pay in Bitcoin.
Excellent, thank you. Can you speak to what extra hardware equipment is necessary for instant virtualization? Excuse me.
So in terms of additional hardware, I mean, that Datto device will be able to give you those instant virtualization capabilities right with that piece of hardware. And we could back up really almost any environment, whether it's a Windows-based environment, Linux, Mac agents. We can't virtualize the Macs because of licensing reasons. But that piece of hardware right there is going to be able to sufficiently give you the ability to virtualize. And then in terms of that restoration process, we've got the ability to restore to dissimilar hardware. So if you had an old server that you've had for a long time, and that's the one that either goes down or is hit with ransomware, and you want to upgrade that as part of this process, we could actually restore to dissimilar hardware. So again, every environment's different, so that I encourage you, you'd have to really have an in-depth conversation with the folks over at PriorityOne to make sure that that whatever solution's put in place really is fit and adapted to your particular environment.
Excellent, thank you. Can you speak to how our attendees can know if their systems are being backed up and backed up properly?
Yeah, again, that would come into a conversation you'd want to have with PriorityOne, where they'd come out and do a kind of a BDR assessment and see exactly what you have. As I mentioned on the webinar, I'm sure everyone's got backups in place of some variety. And so the idea is to come and kind of do an audit of it and say, okay, this is what you have. This is how often you're backing up your data. This is how often you're testing it. And then try to work your way back to make sure that nothing is at risk of not being backed up. And then try to get those RTO and RPO questions answered, because that's really the key to all of this. And so you'd want to have an in-depth kind of audit with the folks at PriorityOne. And the contact information is up on the screen to reach out to them for that information.
Yep, and they can certainly reply as well to any of the emails they've received about the event up to this point if they would like to submit a question. Can you speak a little bit, you certainly talked quite a bit about ransomware. Are you seeing a lot of your customers dealing with ransomware? What's the frequency?
Oh, I would say it's on the hour, multiple attacks an hour. I mean, our tech support office here in Norwalk is down on the 5th floor. I guarantee you, if I walk downstairs and talk to them, there's multiple techs dealing with ransomware attacks. But I said, like as I mentioned, it really has become for us not a huge issue, because it's really as simple as just getting them restored from their last clean backup. And so, we're seeing it on a daily basis, and it's only increasing. I've seen statistics that say that ransomware attacks are up over 1,000% in the last 12 months, and they continue to grow. And again, like I mentioned, healthcare is the industry that's being attacked the most.
Great, thank you. I know we have Nelson Gomes of PriorityOne Group on the line with us. Nelson, I wanted to turn the floor over to you just for a few comments regarding backups.
So thank you everybody for being on this webinar today. It's very reassuring to hear that our partners from Datto and what they're doing. So I wanted to kind of elaborate on a couple of things, because backup being very important and ensuring that the things are being put into play. So with the question regarding Datto and how things are being backed up, our NOC team is constantly monitoring all of the Dattos for all our clients. So Datto has a back-end system where we are always monitoring them. And part of what we do is on the NOC side of things, the Network Operating Center, is they're testing those backups on a daily basis to ensure that that the backups are real and that we're addressing any of those issues. Because at times there are some issues where there are times that we know that there are some failures with certain files, and we have to address those. So that's part of what our NOC team does. Ransomware is an epidemic. It affects 1 in 3 Americans. It's costing over billions and billions of dollars to address it. Datto is one big piece of how we can prevent it. There's a lot of other things that here at PriorityOne that we're doing, which is part of our security bundle, where we're trying to be preventative as possible. And one of the things that we are doing, and we're seeing some great results, is with phishing. And if you don't know what phishing is, we're probably going to put on a webinar to talk a little bit about phishing. But in general, it's one of those things that we're going to, with some of our clients that are part of it, is, we're sending out emails that are masked as legit, but they're not really legit, and it gives us a report to say, oh, here's how many people in your organization that might be a problem, and we kind of go through a training session with them. So you're going to hear a little bit more about some of that stuff. So I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to be in on that call, and look out for some more educational webinars that we're going to be doing on a monthly basis.
Excellent. Thank you, Nelson. That actually transitions really well into our next question. I'll see if you or Michael have anything you want to add in terms of what folks can be doing to lessen their risk of ransomware. You talked about the training opportunities there and what you're going to be doing. Any additional thoughts, Michael, Nelson, on what folks can do just to, again, try to hopefully keep ransomware from getting in?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and then if Nelson has anything to add, he obviously can. Again, it comes down to that multi-layered approach. As I mentioned, when I was on that panel discussion with the gentleman from Homeland Security, that's exactly what they're seeing. You want to have a multi-layered approach, and that's where PriorityOne would come in and kind of do a full assessment and make sure you have as many proactive things in place, as well as, the Datto is kind of your last line of defense. Creating that culture of security, as I mentioned, going through, this webinar is great, to share this with as many people in your office as possible so that everyone knows that, and then keep, it needs to really be an ongoing, culture of security, an ongoing training. So think about, you do, I'm sure, fire drills and those type of things. Everyone should be at top of mind, because it really is that dangerous to all organizations. So that ongoing education is critical, and that's why I'm glad to be a part of this with PriorityOne.
Just to kind of add to that is, we look at Datto as our partner on the recovery side, but part of what we really focus on is on three phases, which is planning, planning, continuity, and recovery. So those are different things within a backup disaster recovery that we want to make sure. There's a lot of preventative stuff that we're doing. We are working with the federal agencies, with the FBI, when some of those occurrences happen. It's more of this is what's happened, and what we want to do is want to be able to give them as much information so we can help them fight this epidemic. In the past, we have actually had panels. We have been part of panels where the FBI and other industry experts are talking about it. So it's being preventative about it, but at the same time have a solution as a last resort to be able to get back where you need to get to. So it's a multitude of different things that need to be in place. So.
Terrific. Well, again, this seems to be a good flow with the questions that we have here. Next one is, are there any other non-backup related solutions that should be considered to protect my company, my organization from potential ransomware attacks? I think we touched on a few, but any additional thoughts?
All right. So we have part of our standard for all our clients is the security bundle that we currently have in place, and that security bundle consists of three different elements. One has to do with a product that is scrubbing all internet data going in and out of your network. So it's going to identify or try to identify and prevent any of that type of intrusion from coming in. Again, unfortunately, none of these tools are 100% proof. And that, I think you'll never find one. It's about how much you can do to prevent it. So we're all talking about preventive and reactive. The other piece of our security is our security bundle is a product that sits on all the computers and is listening and is always watching to see internally if anything came through. Then if something's sitting on internal systems that may have a red flag or some algorithm doesn't make sense, it's going to alert us. So that's the second part. And then the third part I kind of touched upon, which is the phishing, where we're doing preventative and trying to educate the users on what's good and what's not good. So that's when, if you heard me talk about a little bit about how we mock emails that are masked and have ransomware type attached to it. Obviously, it's not going to infect, but it's for us to get some results. And out of those results, we're seeing on average when we do those types of campaigns that we're getting anywhere from 30 to 40% of staff that are going to that email and clicking where they're not supposed to. So once we have that, it's a baseline, and that baseline helps us to educate the end user to say, here's why you clicked on and here are the things you need to do to prevent from doing that in the past. And we're seeing as we do this more often throughout the year that obviously the rate is now much lower than it was originally. So that's one piece of it. But there's different types of phishing that we include. For some of our clients, our larger clients, we actually drop thumb drives in the parking lot. And those thumb drives, people pick them up, bring them to their office, and they stick them in their computer. And that automatically alerts us because a lot of those things happen, and we want to make sure that we prevent that as well. So there's different types of things that we do in place. One of the things that we do as well that doesn't fall on the security piece, but it falls on the data piece is, we do. Some clients have asked, and your larger clients have asked us to do mock downtime, where the staff doesn't know that the systems are going down, and we actually bring them down, and they want to see how the staff reacts to an outage, and how, if they're taking the right measures that they already have in place as far as the recovery plan, right, the disaster plan. So that's part of it too. So there's a lot to it, and I'd love to spend some time with any of you that have those questions, and we can get into more of the nitty-gritty. So,
excellent, Michael. Anything to add?
No, I think we covered just about anything. I mean, the last thing I would add is you've got the contact information up on the screen. I know PriorityOne is great about providing educational content, so I definitely suggest you follow them on Twitter and Facebook and reach out with any questions because it's a great resource.
Excellent. Well, that's going to just about wrap up today's program. As Michael just mentioned, you have contact information here on the final slide and can certainly reply to any of the emails at all you've received concerning today's program. And you can submit additional questions or feedback. And again, you will receive an email within about the next 24 hours with a copy of the presentation, recording a survey. I hope you'll take the opportunity to fill out that survey. Michael, Nelson, I'm going to give both of you opportunity to share just maybe some final thoughts if you have anything else to add, and then I'll wrap up. Michael, start with you.
Yep, just to start, I mean, again, hopefully you got a lot out of this webinar. The one takeaway would be just creating that culture of security. There's a multi-layered approach to it. What we talked about is just really one phase of that. And so I encourage you, again, to really go out and just reach out to PriorityOne and have them come out and do a kind of audit of what you have to make sure that you are secure.
And
Nelson, if you're still with us, any final thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, my final thought is, it's a reality. Don't stick your head in the sand and say, it's not going to happen to me. If there's one thing that I advice that I can give to everyone, have an understanding of where you are at least. And if whether you have somebody that's doing it now for you or you don't, have an understanding. Because then once you have an understanding, then you can put something in place. So that's my piece of advice.
Well, excellent. And I want to certainly remind people, hopefully you'll be able to join PriorityOne Group and Datto at the Night of the Races on May 19th. Keep an eye out for more emails about that, and as well about information about future webinars and programs. And with that, I want to thank Michael for, again, a very informative presentation and answering several questions. Nilson for jumping on and chiming in on a few questions. I want to thank PriorityOne Group for sponsoring today's program, and all of you for taking the time to join us today. This concludes today's webinar. Thanks again for your participation, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.